In today's video, I'm going to have a quick review of what's gone on at Westpac in the morning session. We're also going to be looking at what's been said by Anthony Fauci and by George Soros' co-founder. Hello and welcome to another ACY Securities Hot Topics video. My name is Alistair Schultz and I'm going to be your host through today's trading journey. The first thing I'm looking at today is at Westpac, an Australian Big Four bank. Now their cash earnings have fallen 62% over in the last 12 months. Now, the first two reasons for it all happening, obviously we have the coronavirus situation, but that's not the main implication. The first one is the laundering fines that they've had. It's nearly been a $1.2 billion fine for money laundering. And the second aspect is for bad debt provision. So they've basically run bad debts that were probably not going to be able to recoup their funds from on loans. And therefore, it's hit the bank quite hard where it hurts. Now, moving on from Westpac. We've heard from Quantum Fund co-founder, which is George Soros' co-founder, Jim Rogers. Now, Jim Rogers has given us a bit of an anticipation about what he thinks is going to happen to the global markets. And he's known to be a bit of a perma-bear. So take that with a grain of salt and have a bit of a caveat on it. But regardless, he's talking about the idea of record floods of stimulus. The amount of stimulus we've been seeing across the globe, from central banks, from fiscal action, doesn't really matter where it's coming from, he says are artificially keeping markets inflated in value. Now that is something that is potentially plausible. We have seen that sort of action before, but it's a matter of what he's really anticipating next to come is that he thinks it's going to be the biggest crash that he's seen in his entire 78 years on the planet. Now, he's seeing more attractiveness in commodities, which are considered to be undervalued, than what he does in equities. So whilst he is saying there is definitely going to be a market crash of some kind, he's caveated it with the idea that commodity pricing is going up. Now, whilst he is advocating for commodities, it's important to note that he does have a number of commodities investments himself, including quite heavily into gold. So that could be a little bit of bias on his side, but either way, it's definitely something to consider because he has got some of that wisdom that perhaps I don't have or many others don't have. With 78 years investing, there is probably a little bit to it that you might want to look at. Now, moving on from that, this morning we have seen a fair bit of action in the markets already. West Texas Intermediate Crude and Brent have both started to tumble down a little bit. West Texas got down to $33, having been at $40 on Friday. Now, this is largely driven by the concern about the demand. They're thinking that the demand side of things is probably going to get disintegrated over the next couple of months, and even more so if a Biden election result, because if we do see that, he's more focused on the ESG side of health and keeping environmentally friendly sort of energy options available to the US markets. And therefore, it is seen that perhaps fracking might get a little bit of a tumble down as well. So naturally, West Texas Intermediate Crude has come down a little bit further than some of the other oil commodity choices that you have available to you. Now, moving on from oil, we've also heard just a couple of days before the presidential election, which is going to be Tuesday night US time and roughly sometime in the early AM Australian Eastern Standard Time, Anthony Fauci has basically smacked the president, saying that just before the days of the election, he has not handled the coronavirus situation well. And as a White House infectious diseases advisor, you would expect him to be more on the Republican side, but he's actually thrown his hat in a little bit for a President Joe Biden situation to occur. So it does seem that he's going against it. The White House has responded and sort of been very critical of his statements, but either way, it is definitely something that you probably don't want to have as you are running for president just a few days before, someone within your own White House committee team that is actually advocating for your adversary. But regardless, definitely something interesting. We always see good things coming out of the Trump news or media. It's something good to read anyway. Now, moving forward onto the news ahead of today, we've got a lot coming out, but none of it's high impact. So we are seeing a lot of manufacturing indexes and PMIs coming out today. We're seeing them from Germany, France, Italy, Spain. We're also seeing them from China, Canada, Switzerland, the US. So there is a lot to do with manufacturing PMIs. The one that stands out the most there for me that I think will be a higher impact event for the day will be the Australian Commodity Pricing Index. And that's important, obviously, because Australia does happen to be one of those countries that deals exclusively almost in commodities for a lot of its profit. So definitely a couple of things to keep your eyes on, but don't forget, this week is a really, really big week. We have a US presidential election. We have 3 central banks reporting about monetary policy. We have still got coronavirus in the spotlight that's going on. In addition to that, on Friday, it's going to be non-farm payroll And we have a swath of earnings results coming out this week for companies like Ferrari, Uber, and of course Alibaba, PayPal. There's a whole stack of them. AstraZeneca's included in that as well. So be wary of what's going on this week. There is going to be a lot of news. There's going to be increased volatility than you would usually expect. And it is likely going to leave us with some very good opportunities for the trading in the week ahead. Now, if you have any questions from today's video, please feel free to get in contact with me via my social media accounts. Of course, you can always email me at talktoal@acy.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this video so you can get more great content from me and ACY Securities in the future. Have a great trading day ahead.